At exactly 2:14 p.m., the polished hardwood floor of Apex Vanguard Athletics reflected nearly every light in the building. The private basketball academy sat on the north side of Chicago, inside a six-story glass structure that cost $28.4 million to build, and every inch of it seemed designed to remind visitors how much money they did not have. Suspended above the main court, $45,000 worth of imported LED lighting flooded the gym with bright white light that made the floor shine like fresh ice. It was spotless. At least it was supposed to be. Elias Thorne pushed a wide microfiber mop across the free throw lane and carefully worked around a puddle of sweat left behind by a client who paid $1,200 every month to train there. His repaired left knee stiffened as he bent down to wipe the remaining moisture by hand. The surgery scar hidden beneath his work pants still ached whenever Chicago's weather changed too quickly. Today it hurt. A man wearing a navy compression shirt dribbled past him without slowing down. "Careful, janitor," the man said. Elias moved aside immediately. The client never said thank you. Three women standing near the shooting machine watched Elias work for a moment before returning to a conversation about vacation homes in Scottsdale. One of them accidentally dropped a protein shake bottle on the floor less than 10 feet from him. Nobody picked it up. They simply looked at him. Elias walked over and grabbed it. Routine made things easier. 2 years earlier, he had been fighting for a professional basketball contract in a developmental league outside Milwaukee. Then a torn ACL, a damaged meniscus, and a medical bill totaling $87,004.63 had reduced his basketball career to a cardboard box full of old photographs stored in a closet. Now he cleaned floors. Life moved fast. Near center court, an assistant trainer adjusted a digital shooting monitor worth $18,900, while two investors argued about cryptocurrency. On the far side of the facility, a row of executive clients practiced jump shots while their financial advisors watched from leather recliners. Nobody noticed Elias unless they needed something. That was usually how it worked. The heavy glass entrance doors opened with a soft hydraulic hiss. Nobody looked up. A man wearing a faded maroon zip-up hoodie stepped inside. His gray sweatpants were worn at the cuffs. Tiny drops of rain still clung to one sleeve. The clothes looked completely out of place inside a facility where some members spent more on sneakers than most families spent on rent. The receptionist glanced toward him, then immediately looked away. No greeting, no smile, no welcome. The giant simply continued walking. At 7 feet 1 inch tall, he was impossible to miss, yet somehow everyone managed to ignore him anyway. Several clients assumed he was a delivery worker. One briefly thought might be security. Nobody bothered asking. The stranger paused near the entrance and slowly studied the facility. His eyes moved from the hardwood floor to the biometric training stations positioned along the wall. He looked at the motion capture cameras that mounted above the baskets. He examined the rehabilitation equipment beside the weight room. He seemed interested in details, not appearances. A younger trainer carrying a tablet nearly bumped into him. "Locker rooms are downstairs," the trainer said without stopping. The giant nodded politely. The trainer never realized he had just spoken to one of the most recognizable athletes in American sports history. Across the court, Elias noticed the interaction. He looked twice. Something about the stranger felt familiar. Not the face, the posture. Most people who entered Apex Vanguard walked around like they owned the building. This man moved differently. Calm, patient, comfortable. The kind of confidence that didn't need witnesses. Elias returned to cleaning. A basketball rolled toward him from the corner of the court. One of the executive clients waved. "Hey, ball, not a request, a command." Elias picked it up and tossed it back. The client immediately returned to his conversation without acknowledgement. The giant in the hoodie watched the exchange from across the court. His expression never changed. A few seconds later, Elias wheeled a yellow cleaning cart toward the sideline and parked it beside a row of luxury seats. One of the academy members frowned. "Can you move that thing somewhere else?" Elias looked around. The cart wasn't blocking anything. Still, he moved it. The member nodded approvingly as if granting permission for Elias to exist. The giant saw that too and kept watching. A digital clock above the court changed from 2:16 p.m. to 2:17 p.m. The facility remained busy. Phones buzzed, shoes squeaked. Investors talked loudly, machines beeped, yet somehow the giant stranger and the maintenance workers seemed to exist in an entirely different world from everyone else inside the building. One had more money than anyone in the room, the other had less. Neither felt the need to announce themselves. Near the baseline, Elias grabbed a towel and pressed it against a fresh spill. His repaired knee buckled slightly before recovering. Nobody noticed, except one person. The giant's eyes followed the movement immediately, not because he pitied him, because he recognized it. Athletes always recognize certain injuries. The limp was small. The story behind it wasn't. The stranger slipped both hands into his hoodie pockets and continued quietly studying the academy, as if he were measuring something nobody else could see. A decision seemed to be forming, not about the building, about the people inside it. And then a sharp silver whistle suddenly cut through the gym. Every basketball stopped bouncing. Every conversation paused. Every head turned toward center court, including the giant in the maroon hoodie, including Elias. And the man holding the whistle already looked annoyed. Before we go any further, have you ever watched someone get treated like they were invisible only to discover they were the most important person in the room? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you enjoy stories about respect, dignity, and the moments money can't buy. Based on the story blueprint and character outline provided in the uploaded project files. The sharp whistle echoed across the court a second time as the man holding it started walking. Coach Donovan Royce never hurried anywhere. At 46 years old, the former NBA champion carried himself like every room belonged to him before he entered it. His custom black tracksuit had his initials embroidered in silver thread near the collar. A championship ring from 1998 flashed under the LED lights every time he moved his left hand. People noticed. Donovan made sure of that. The elite training camp immediately stopped. 23 paying clients gathered near center court while assistant coaches stepped aside without being asked. Even the investors sitting courtside paused their conversations. When Donovan moved, the building adjusted around him. That was how Apex Vanguard worked. He lowered the whistle from his mouth and scanned the court. His eyes landed on the giant stranger near the entrance, then narrowed. The maroon hoodie, the worn sweatpants, the absence of expensive shoes. Everything about the man irritated him. Not because he recognized him, because he didn't. Donovan believed he knew every person worth knowing. This giant clearly wasn't one of them. Without breaking eye contact, Donovan started crossing the court. His expensive white sneakers stepped directly onto the area Elias had spent 5 minutes cleaning moments earlier. A thin, muddy footprint immediately stained the polished hardwood. Elias saw it happen. Donovan saw Elias see it happen. The coach stepped on the exact spot again. A second footprint appeared. Message delivered. Elias lowered his eyes and gripped the handle of his mop a little tighter. There was no point saying anything. There never was. 2 years working at Apex Vanguard had taught him exactly how much his opinion was worth inside the building. Nothing. Donovan finally stopped a few feet from the giant. The height difference that intimidated most people seemed to have no effect on him. Or at least he pretended it didn't. "You lost?" Donovan asked. The giant remained calm. Donovan looked him up and down. "Delivery entrance is around back." Several clients laughed. The giant didn't. Neither did Elias. Donovan folded his arms. "This is a private facility." Still no response. The silence annoyed him more than an argument would have. Most people rushed to explain themselves when challenged. Most people became defensive. Most people tried to prove something. This man did none of those things. He simply stood there, patiently. That irritated Donovan almost immediately. One of the investors sitting courtside smirked. Another raised his phone, sensing entertainment. The giant glanced briefly around the facility. His attention moved across the rehabilitation equipment mounted along the west wall, then toward the training stations, then the shooting analytics system. He seemed more interested in the academy itself than the confrontation. That bothered Donovan even more. "Hey!" "Nothing." "Hey!" The giant finally looked at him. Donovan pointed toward the door. "I said this is a private facility. I heard you." The voice was deep and calm. No anger, no challenge, no fear. Just a statement. Donovan gave a short laugh. "Good, then leave." A few clients chuckled again. The giant didn't move. Across the court, Elias slowly rolled his cleaning cart toward the sideline while pretending not to watch. Nobody wanted to attract Donovan's attention, especially employees. The coach's reputation extended far beyond basketball. Assistant trainers feared him. Staff members avoided him. Clients admired him as long as they kept paying. The formula worked. Money often disguises arrogance as leadership. Donovan stepped closer. You got a membership? No. You got an appointment? No. Then why are you here? The giant's eyes drifted briefly toward the advanced rehabilitation wing. Looking around, more laughter erupted from nearby clients. One investor nearly spilled his bottled water, looking around inside Apex Vanguard as if it were a public museum. Donovan shook his head. This isn't a shopping mall, the giant. I know. The answer landed like a brick wall. Simple, unshaken. Impossible to provoke. For the first time, Donovan felt something he wasn't used to feeling. Uncertainty. Just a small amount, but enough to annoy him. He glanced toward the reception desk. The receptionist immediately looked away. Nobody had checked the man's name. Nobody had asked why he was there. Nobody had done anything except judge his clothes. That realization lasted less than a second before Donovan pushed it aside. His assumptions felt more comfortable. He trusted those. Across the court, Elias bent down to collect a discarded towel. His left knee stiffened. Pain shot briefly through the joint before fading. The giant noticed immediately. Again, the observation was quick, almost invisible. But Elias caught it this time. For a split second, their eyes met. No words, no gestures, just recognition. The kind that exists between people who know what injury costs. Donovan completely missed it. His attention remained locked on the stranger. You know what I think? The giant didn't answer. I think you're one of those guys who walks into places hoping somebody important notices you. Several clients nodded. One even laughed loudly. The giant's expression remained unchanged. Donovan continued. You see successful people and assume they owe you something. Silence. You want a tour? Nothing. You want a selfie? Still nothing. The coach spread his arms dramatically. Sorry. We're all out. A louder round of laughter spread through the gym. Even some assistant trainers smiled nervously. The giant looked around the room. 42 wealthy clients. Millions of dollars represented inside one gym. Not a single person questioning the behavior. Interesting. Very interesting. Donovan mistook the silence for surrender. He smiled. Bad mistake. Listen carefully, he said. His voice became colder. I don't care if you're selling something. He pointed toward the exit. I don't care if you're lost. Another step closer, and I definitely don't care how tall you are. The entire gym watched. Even the basketball machines seemed quieter. Donovan stopped directly in front of him. Leave before I call security. The giant slowly shifted his attention from Donovan to the nearest equipment rack. His eyes settled on a basketball resting alone on the metal shelf. Then he looked back at the coach. For the first time since entering the building, a faint hint of amusement appeared in his eyes, and Donovan immediately hated it. The faint amusement remained in Shaq's eyes as his attention drifted away from Donovan and back toward the equipment lining the walls. Most people would have reacted. Most people would have argued. Most people would have used the opportunity to remind everyone exactly who they were. Shaquille O'Neal did none of those things. His massive hands stayed inside the pockets of his faded maroon hoodie while he slowly walked toward the rehabilitation wing. The wealthy clients parted without realizing they were moving out of his path. Their attention remained fixed on the confrontation they thought they were watching. They completely missed the fact that Shaq had already lost interest in Donovan. The equipment interested him far more. Mounted along the west wall stood 6 biomechanical assessment stations imported from Germany at a cost of $312,000. Nearby sat a computerized gait analysis treadmill capable of measuring asymmetrical movement patterns down to fractions of a degree. A row of recovery pods occupied the far corner, each costing nearly $18,500. Expensive, very expensive, but Shaq wasn't impressed by price tags. He was looking for usefulness. For 6 months, he had traveled across the country studying rehabilitation facilities, performance centers, and sports medicine programs. From Phoenix to Atlanta, from Dallas to Seattle, he had walked through dozens of buildings searching for ideas, not for himself, for other people. The black leather portfolio resting inside his SUV contained preliminary plans for a 100 million thousand rehabilitation foundation focused entirely on helping injured adult athletes rebuild their lives after devastating setbacks. Too many careers ended because recovery was only available to people with money. Shaq knew that better than most. His eyes paused on a force plate testing station. Good equipment, poor placement. The machine sat directly beside a heavily trafficked walkway where constant movement could affect athlete focus during evaluations. Somebody designed this facility to impress investors, not therapists. That observation went into the mental notebook. Nearby, Donovan followed him like an irritated landlord escorting an unwanted visitor. "You deaf?" Shaq continued, examining the equipment. "You understand English?" "Nothing." Donovan laughed sarcastically. "Maybe giant ears don't work either." Several clients laughed with him. Others simply watched. A few looked uncomfortable. Nobody intervened. That observation also went into the mental notebook. Across the gym, Elias carefully folded a stack of towels beside his cleaning cart. His shift technically ended at 3 p.m. He still had 41 minutes left. 41 minutes before returning to the small apartment he rented above a tire repair shop on South Pulaski Road. 41 minutes before opening another medical bill he couldn't afford. 41 minutes before pretending everything was fine. Life had become a collection of countdowns. As he bent to place supplies inside a storage compartment, pain flashed through his left knee. The movement was subtle. Most people wouldn't notice. Shaq did, immediately. His eyes shifted. The limp appeared again when Elias took 3 steps toward the sideline. Short stride, protective movement, uneven weight transfer, familiar, very familiar. Shaq had spent decades around athletes. He had seen that exact walk hundreds of times. The walk of someone whose body had healed enough to function, but never enough to forget. Elias stopped near a rack of basketballs and rubbed his knee for less than a second before lowering his hand. Automatic, almost unconscious. The kind of habit people develop when pain becomes part of daily life. Shaq watched quietly. Donovan misread the direction of his gaze. "Oh, now you're looking for a job?" More laughter. Donovan pointed toward Elias. "We already got a janitor." The words hit harder than Donovan realized, not because they insulted Shaq, because they reduced Elias to a job title. Elias kept organizing supplies without reacting. Years of practice. Years of hearing versions of the same thing. Janitor, maintenance guy. Cleaning staff, the invisible man. People stopped using his name long ago, except for payroll. Shaq looked at Elias again. Something didn't fit. A maintenance worker usually carried himself differently. Elias moved like an athlete, even injured, even exhausted, even defeated. The habits remained, the balance, the awareness, the way he instinctively tracked every basketball moving across the court. Former athletes never completely stop being athletes. The game stays inside them. A client suddenly launched a three-pointer from the corner. The shot missed badly. Before the ball bounced twice, Elias instinctively stepped forward and caught it with one hand. Cleanly, naturally, without looking. The movement lasted less than 2 seconds. Then he immediately handed the ball back. Nobody seemed impressed. Shaq noticed that catch wasn't accidental. Donovan didn't notice because he was still busy talking. "You know what makes this place special?" No answer, the people. Still nothing, the successful people. Shaq finally glanced toward him. Donovan smiled. "There it is, eye contact." The coach spread his arms dramatically. "These people built companies." Several investors nodded proudly. "They earned their place." Another nod. "They belong here." His eyes shifted briefly toward Elias. Then back to Shaq. The message was obvious. Some people belonged, some didn't. Simple, convenient, wrong. Shaq looked around the facility once more. The equipment was impressive. The architecture was impressive. The membership fees were impressive. Everything looked successful. Yet something felt broken, not mechanically, culturally. The foundation he wanted to build wasn't supposed to work like this. Recovery wasn't about status. Pain didn't care about income. A torn ligament couldn't tell the difference between a millionaire and a janitor. Injury treated everyone equally. People rarely did. A digital clock mounted above the court changed to 2:24 p.m. The gym remained silent. Everyone sensed the confrontation wasn't over. Donovan sensed, too, his patience was evaporating. The giant wasn't intimidated, wasn't embarrassed, wasn't leaving. That violated every expectation he had. and people who build their identity around control rarely handle that well. Donovan stepped directly into Shaq's path, close enough to make the message clear, close enough to force a decision. His jaw tightened, his smile disappeared, and for the first time that afternoon, genuine frustration started leaking through the confidence. His jaw tightened as he planted himself directly in Shaq's path. The entire gym seemed to pause. Basketballs stopped bouncing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the assistant coaches standing near the shooting stations quietly drifted closer, pretending to organize equipment while trying not to miss whatever happened next. Donovan Royce had spent most of his adult life controlling rooms. Press conferences, locker rooms, corporate meetings, training camps. He understood power, and power usually followed a predictable formula. The loudest voice won. The richest man dominated. The most famous person controlled the attention. Yet somehow this giant stranger had walked into his building wearing clothes worth less than one of Donovan's warm-up jackets and completely disrupted the formula. Without trying, that bothered him. A lot. Donovan stepped closer until only a few inches separated them. "You know who I am?" Shaq looked at him calmly. "Yes." The answer caught Donovan off guard. "Then you understand whose court you're standing on." Shaq didn't respond. Donovan immediately filled the silence himself. "I won an NBA championship in 1998. He raised his left hand. The ring flashed beneath the LED lights. Several clients nodded. Most had already heard the story dozens of times. Donovan never got tired of telling it. "I built Apex Vanguard from nothing." Another gesture. 347 active members. Another gesture. $1,200 monthly memberships. Another. Corporate sponsors. Another. Private investors. Another. And a waiting list that's 18 months long. The room remained quiet. Donovan smiled. The speech usually worked. People normally became impressed by this point. The giant remained expressionless, not hostile, not intimidated, just uninterested. That irritated Donovan even more than outright disrespect. Across the gym, Elias slowly pushed his cleaning cart toward a storage closet, but deliberately moved slower than normal. Nobody was leaving now. Something was building. He could feel it. Years of sports competition had taught him how to recognize momentum before it arrived. This felt exactly like the final seconds before a fight broke out. Donovan pointed toward the entrance. "I'm going to make this simple." Shaq waited. "You leave now." No response. "Or I call security." Still nothing. The former champion laughed. "Actually, scratch that." He pulled a phone from his pocket. "I'll call armed security." A few clients exchanged glances that seemed excessive. Even by Donovan's standards, the giant still didn't move. The silence stretched. 3 seconds. 4, 5. Long enough to make people uncomfortable. Donovan hated uncomfortable silence. He preferred hearing himself talk. "You think this is a joke?" "Nothing." "You think standing there makes some kind of statement?" "Nothing." "You think you're special because you're tall?" "Nothing." The coach's frustration continued growing. His words became sharper, less controlled, more personal. Exactly the way frustration often reveals character. Shaq finally glanced away from him. Not toward the exit, not toward security, toward the equipment rack. The movement seemed insignificant, but Elias noticed it. So did several former athletes training nearby. The rack held dozens of basketballs. Only one sat alone on the upper shelf, solid black, official size, brand new. Shaq walked toward it. Donovan followed immediately. "Where do you think you're going?" The giant reached for the ball, wrapped one massive hand around it, lifted it effortlessly. The gym became even quieter. A strange feeling spread through the room. Nobody understood why, but everyone suddenly felt like they should keep watching. Shaq bounced the ball once. The sound cracked sharply across the polished hardwood. Boom! The ball returned to his hand. One bounce, nothing more. Yet somehow the entire building felt different afterward. Donovan folded his arms. "Oh, good." His voice dripped with sarcasm. "We're playing basketball now." Several clients laughed. A few looked nervous. Shaq slowly turned toward him. For the first time since entering Apex Vanguard, he gave Donovan his complete attention. Not a glance. Not a look. His complete attention. The effect was immediate. Donovan felt it, if he didn't understand why. The giant's eyes remained calm, steady, focused. The expression belonged to someone making a decision, not someone reacting emotionally. A subtle difference, a dangerous one. Elias found himself holding his breath. Across the court, one investor quietly lowered his phone. Another raised his. Nobody wanted to miss this. The digital wall clock changed to 2:31 p.m. Shaq spoke. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I've spent 6 months looking for the right place. Several people frowned. The statement felt completely unrelated. Donovan laughed. Congratulations. Shaq ignored him. I've visited facilities in 11 states. Silence. I've met coaches, doctors, therapists, trainers, investors. The room listened. Without realizing it, I've learned a lot. Donovan shook his head. What are you talking about? Shaq bounced the ball once more. Boom. Then stopped. His eyes locked onto Donovan. Completely. I'll win a $100 million foundation in 3 shots against you. The sentence landed like a weight dropping onto concrete. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Several people actually looked around to make sure they heard correctly. $100 million, 3 shots against Donovan Royce. Right now, the silence became almost surreal. Then came confusion, then disbelief, then laughter. A loud explosion of laughter. The investor first. The assistant coaches joined them. Several clients doubled over. One man nearly dropped his phone. Donovan laughed harder than anyone. He bent forward with both hands on his knees, laughing, gasping, trying to recover. The entire challenge sounded absurd. A stranger in old sweatpants. $100 million, 3 shots. The math didn't even make sense. Finally, Donovan straightened up and wiped tears from his eyes. Oh, that's good. More laughter. That's really good. He pointed directly at Shaq. You walk in off the street, refuse to leave. And now you're betting $100 million? Another wave of laughter. Donovan shook his head. Buddy, I don't know if you're crazy or just stupid. The giant remained completely calm. That only made the laughter die faster. Because the longer he stood there without smiling, the less it felt like a joke. And for the first time all afternoon, a tiny seed of uncertainty appeared somewhere deep inside Donovan Royce. He immediately tried to ignore it, but it was already there. The tiny seed of uncertainty appeared inside Donovan Royce, and he crushed it immediately with a laugh. Then another laugh, then a third. The gym joined him. 42 wealthy clients surrounded the court with phones raised in the air, eager to capture what they assumed would become the most entertaining humiliation Apex Vanguard had seen all year. Nobody expected the stranger to win. Most didn't even expect him to compete. One investor wearing a $700-800 watch whispered to his friend, "This is going straight to social media." His friend grinned. Poor guy has no idea what he's walking into. Several assistant coaches moved the portable training stations away from the court. A shooting machine was rolled toward the sideline. Within minutes, the main floor transformed from a private training session into a live spectacle. People loved watching confidence get punished, especially when they believed the outcome was guaranteed. Donovan thrived on that energy. He grabbed a basketball from Shaq's hands and spun it on one finger. The crowd applauded. Not because the trick was impressive, because they were already on his side. The coach pointed toward center court. Let's make something clear. He bounced the ball twice. I spent 15 years playing against the best athletes on earth. Another bounce. I've forgotten more basketball than most people ever learn. The crowd nodded. Donovan smiled. The speech felt familiar, comfortable, safe, a place where he knew he could win. Across the court, Elias stood beside his cleaning cart near the baseline. He wasn't smiling. Something felt off. The giant remained entirely too calm. People about to embarrass themselves usually showed signs. Nervousness, excitement, overconfidence. Something. This man showed none of it. Shaq simply stood near the three-point line with his hands resting naturally at his sides, waiting. Patient, almost relaxed, as if he were standing in line for coffee. The digital clock above the court read 2:35 p.m. Donovan bounced the ball, 3 possessions. He pointed toward Shaq. You stopped me once, we'll keep playing. A grin spread across his face. If I score, we're done. Several investors applauded. The challenge sounded fair, at least on the surface. What they ignored was the obvious reality. Donovan coached basketball every day. The giant was supposedly some random visitor. The game had already been rigged by assumptions. Donovan walked to the top of the key. His favorite spot, his signature move, the fadeaway jumper. For years he had demonstrated it during camps, corporate events, and private clinics. Clients loved watching it. The move wasn't explosive anymore. He wasn't 6. but he remained skilled enough to impress non-professional athletes. He dribbled once, twice, then pointed at Shaq. Try to block it. Laughter spread through the crowd. Several phones zoomed in. One assistant coach quietly shook his head. The stranger didn't even move into a defensive stance. Odd, very odd. Elias noticed it too. Shaq wasn't preparing like someone trying to stop a shot. He looked like someone studying a puzzle. Donovan took that as disrespect. Bad idea. The coach immediately attacked. One hard dribble, a shoulder fake, another dribble. Then he rose into his familiar fadeaway motion. Everything looked smooth, practiced, predictable. And predictable was dangerous around experienced players, because patterns eventually become habits. Shaq finally moved. Not explosively, not dramatically, no leap, no sprint, no heroic chase, just one step, a single perfectly timed step, nothing more. To most spectators, it looked almost lazy. To anyone who truly understood basketball, it was devastating. The angle disappeared. The shooting lane vanished. The space Donovan expected no longer existed. His eyes widened. Only slightly. But enough. For the first time all afternoon, something interrupted his confidence. Recognition. The shot was wrong. He knew it before releasing the ball. Too late. Momentum had already carried him through the motion. The ball left his hands, or at least it tried to. A massive hand appeared directly in front of the shooting path. No jump, no spectacular highlight, just perfect positioning. The collision sounded like a car door slamming shut. Wham! The basketball exploded backward, not downward, not sideways, backward. The force shocked everyone watching. The ball rocketed toward half-court, bounced twice across the hardwood, and rolled directly beneath a row of luxury seats. Silence. Instant, absolute. Nobody moved. Even the phones remained frozen. The entire gym stared at the empty space where Donovan's shot was supposed to be. The coach landed awkwardly from his fadeaway. His expression changed immediately. Confusion first, then disbelief, then anger, because the block hadn't looked athletic. That was what bothered him most. Athletic plays could be explained away. People got lucky. People jumped higher. People reacted faster. This wasn't luck, this was geometry. The Giant had simply erased the shot before it existed. Across the baseline, Elias blinked, then blinked again. The movement had been so efficient that his brain almost rejected it. Donovan slowly turned around. The basketball sat nearly 40 feet away. Nobody had ever done that to his fadeaway in front of clients. Not once. Not in this building. Not ever. A wealthy investor finally broke the silence. Was that? He stopped. Nobody finished the sentence, because nobody knew exactly what they had witnessed. The Giant remained calm, exactly as before. His breathing hadn't changed. His expression hadn't changed. His posture hadn't changed. The only thing different in the entire gym was everyone else's face. Shaq looked toward the ball resting near the sideline. Then back at Donovan, still calm, still patient, still waiting. The coach's jaw tightened. The humiliation hadn't fully arrived yet. But for the first time all afternoon, Donovan Royce realized there was a very real possibility that he was no longer controlling the room. And that realization hit harder than the block itself. Donovan Royce refused to let it show. The moment the silence started settling over the court, he marched toward the ball near the sideline and snatched it up with far more force than necessary. His face had turned noticeably red, not from physical effort, from embarrassment. A few of the investors looked away. Others suddenly became very interested in checking their phones. Nobody wanted to be caught witnessing a powerful man's humiliation, especially while he was still processing it. Donovan spun around and pointed aggressively at the crowd. Relax. Nobody laughed. The absence of laughter irritated him even more. He forced a grin. That wasn't defense. Silence. That was timing. More silence. A lucky guess. The explanation sounded weak even to him. Unfortunately, it was the only one available. He bounced the ball hard against the floor. You don't get lucky twice. Several clients nodded, not because they believed him, because agreeing felt safer. The Giant stood quietly near the free throw line, waiting. No celebration, no trash talk, no smile, nothing. The lack of reaction somehow made Donovan's frustration worse. People who fight back can be challenged. People who remain calm become mirrors. And mirrors are dangerous. They show things people don't want to see. Donovan pointed toward Shaq again. The Giant nodded once. No speech, no dramatic response, just agreement. That irritated the coach all over again. Across the gym, Elias slowly wheeled his cleaning cart toward the storage area before stopping near the baseline. His shift had completely disappeared from his mind. Nobody was working anymore. Not really. Even the assistant trainers had abandoned their tasks. Everyone watched the court. Everyone watched Donovan. Everyone watched the stranger. The atmosphere had changed. The first block had cracked something. Not Donovan's confidence. Not yet. But definitely the crowd's certainty. For the first time, people weren't completely sure how this ended. Elias studied Donovan carefully. Years of observation had created habits. 2 years cleaning courts meant 2 years watching drills. 2 years watching private lessons. 2 years listening without being noticed. People ignored janitors. That gave them access to things others missed. He had watched Donovan run thousands of offensive repetitions. Thousands. And somewhere during those endless hours, patterns had become obvious. The coach had a tell. A small one. A mechanical flaw. Most people never noticed because they were busy watching the basketball. Elias watched feet. Athletes often do. The best movement starts there. Donovan bounced the ball and took position near the top of the key. His shoulders looked tense. His jaw remained tight, his breathing slightly faster. Elias knew what was coming, the crossover. Donovan loved that move, especially when trying to prove something. The coach always shifted his weight unevenly before attacking left. A tiny hitch, a brief heel adjustment. Almost invisible, almost. Elias looked toward the giant. Shaq happened to glance in his direction at the exact same moment. Their eyes met only for a second. Elias hesitated, then tapped his own left heel against the floor. Once, pause, twice, tap, tap, that was all. No pointing. No explanation, no words. The gesture lasted less than 2 seconds. Nobody noticed, except Shaq. Immediately, his eyes briefly moved toward Donovan's feet. Then back. The giant understood. Not the exact details, the concept. Athletes communicate differently. Years inside sports create a strange language. Tiny signals, small observations, mechanical clues. Veterans recognize them instinctively. Elias returned to standing beside his cart as if nothing happened. No acknowledgement, no smile, nothing. The exchange vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Donovan remained completely unaware. He bounced the ball again. His confidence had partially returned. The crowd helped. People wanted familiar outcomes. They desperately wanted the universe to make sense again. The former NBA champion was supposed to win. The stranger was supposed to lose. Order needed restoring. Donovan pointed at Shaq. "You got lucky." No answer. The coach smirked. "Let's see what happens when I actually try." Several clients laughed nervously. Not nearly as loudly as before. Shaq noticed. Donovan noticed too and hated it. The coach began dribbling, slowly, measuring distance, setting rhythm, preparing. Across the court, one investor whispered to another, "You know this guy?" "No." "Former player, maybe?" The second investor shrugged. No idea. Questions had started appearing. That was new. 3 minutes earlier, nobody questioned anything. Now uncertainty moved through the room like electricity. Assistant coaches exchanged glances. The receptionist quietly stepped away from her desk. Even security personnel near the entrance shifted closer. Everyone sensed something unusual. They simply didn't know what. Donovan lowered his stance. The basketball moved rapidly between his hands. His confidence continued growing. This possession would fix everything. One clean move, one basket, one moment. The crowd would remember who he was, the embarrassment would disappear, the story would end properly. At least that was the plan. Shaq stood motionless, watching, waiting, studying. His attention drifted briefly toward Donovan's lower body, the feet, the balance, the weight distribution, just as Elias had suggested. Interesting, very interesting. The flaw appeared almost immediately. Small, predictable, consistent. Enough. A faint understanding settled across Shaq's face. Not satisfaction, recognition. The same look a veteran mechanic gets when finally identifying the source of a strange noise. Problem located. Solution pending. The digital wall clock above the court changed to 2:38 p.m. Donovan bounced the ball one final time, then lowered his shoulders and attacked. Donovan exploded forward the instant his shoulders dropped. The basketball snapped from his right hand to his left in a hard crossover designed to create separation. It was one of the moves he had spent years teaching wealthy clients who wanted to feel like professional athletes for 90 minutes every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Most of them never performed it correctly. Donovan did. or at least he usually did. This time was different. The moment his left heel touched the floor, Shaq already knew what was coming. Tap, plant shift. The exact sequence Elias had silently identified. A tiny mechanical habit. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just enough information for someone experienced enough to recognize it. Shaq moved. The reaction looked impossible to people unfamiliar with high-level basketball. A man weighing 325 pounds shouldn't have been able to change direction that quickly. He shouldn't have been able to mirror the movement so perfectly. He definitely shouldn't have looked that effortless doing it. Yet somehow he did. No wasted motion, no panic, no reaching, just positioning. The crowd watched the crossover unfold, then watched it disappear. Donovan expected open space. Instead, he found Shaq standing exactly where the space was supposed to be. The realization hit instantly. Too late. His eyes widened, his balance shifted. The ball traveled toward his left side, and a massive hand calmly removed it from the equation. Clean, no slap, no collision, no foul, no argument. Just possession. Gone. The steal happened so smoothly that several people didn't immediately realize it had occurred. 1 second, Donovan was dribbling. The next second, Shaq had the ball. The transition looked less like defense and more like theft committed by someone who already knew the combination to the safe. Silence spread again, the dangerous kind. Donovan spun around, too slow. Shaq was already moving, not showing off, simply walking toward the basket. The giant bounced the ball once. Twice his pace remained casual. The entire gym followed him with their eyes. Nobody spoke. Nobody laughed. Nobody understood what was happening anymore. Across the baseline, Elias felt something unfamiliar. Hope. A small amount, but enough. For 2 years, he had watched Donovan dominate every conversation, every drill, every meeting, every employee interaction. The coach controlled the atmosphere of the building. People adapted to him. Nobody challenged him. Nobody even tried. Now someone was, and doing it without saying a word. The contrast felt impossible to ignore. Near half-court, Donovan desperately accelerated. Embarrassment supplied extra energy. He chased Shaq toward the basket. The giant glanced briefly over his shoulder, saw him coming, calculated the distance, then continued forward without concern. That somehow made things worse. Donovan wanted resistance, wanted urgency, wanted acknowledgement. Instead, he received indifference, the cruelest response possible. Several investors exchanged nervous looks. Phones remained raised, recording every second. Nobody planned to stop now. One assistant trainer quietly muttered, "What is happening?" Another shook his head. No idea. Neither looked away. Shaq reached the left elbow area approximately 18 feet from the basket, then stopped. Completely. The sudden pause confused everyone, including Donovan. The coach expected a layup, or a dunk, or some dramatic display. Not this. Toward the backboard. The basket sat at a slight angle from his position, an awkward shot for most players. The giant calmly lifted the ball. One hand, smooth motion, no rush. The ball left his fingertips. Bank. The shot struck the glass. Softly, perfect angle, perfect speed, perfect touch. The ball dropped through the net. Swish, nothing spectacular, nothing flashy, just correct. The simplicity somehow made it more humiliating. Donovan reached the area a fraction too late. His momentum carried forward, his feet scrambled for balance, and then the problem arrived. The same problem Elias had noticed years ago. The uneven weight transfer, the left heel, the bad recovery angle. Under normal circumstances, Donovan compensated for it. Under pressure, habit became liabilities. His right foot slipped slightly, his balance vanished, and the former champion crashed onto the hardwood. Not violently, not dangerously, just awkwardly. Enough. The sound echoed through the gym. Every camera captured it. Every phone recorded it. Every witness saw it. The coach remained on the floor for a moment. Stunned, not injured, just stunned. Because the fall wasn't supposed to happen. The steal wasn't supposed to happen. The bank shot wasn't supposed to happen. Nothing about this afternoon was behaving correctly anymore. The basketball rolled gently beneath the basket. Shaq watched it stop, then turned around. Calm as ever. His breathing remained steady. No celebration, no pointing, no taunting, no chest pounding. Nothing. The giant simply looked at Donovan, not with arrogance, not with pity, just observation, the same way he had been observing all afternoon. That made the moment unbearable, because Donovan couldn't dismiss it as showmanship, couldn't blame trash talk. Couldn't blame emotion, couldn't even blame luck. The second play had been cleaner than the first. More deliberate, more obvious. The crowd felt it. A wealthy investor lowered his phone first. Then another, then another. Nobody laughed. Not a single person. The absence of laughter filled the gym more completely than noise ever could. A few clients shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided eye contact with Donovan altogether. One man quietly walked backward toward the sideline. Nobody wanted to be associated with the losing side of a public embarrassment. Human nature worked that way. Across the court, Elias looked at the giant. For the first time, Shaq glanced back. Only briefly, the exchange lasted less than a second. No words, none needed. One athlete had recognized a flaw. Another athlete had used it. That was all. Veterans understood. Donovan slowly climbed to his feet. His expensive tracksuit now carried streaks of dust from the hardwood. His jaw clenched, his fists tightened. The confidence was still there. But something else had joined it now. Something uglier, something louder. Because the crowd wasn't laughing anymore, and Donovan Royce had just realized he was one possession away from losing far more than a basketball challenge. The realization hit him like cold water. Not because of the game, because of the audience. 42 paying clients stood around the perimeter of the court. Several investors had already stopped pretending to hide their reactions. Phones remained pointed toward him from every angle. Even the assistant coaches, who usually laughed at his jokes, now looked uncertain. The room felt different, dangerously different. Donovan had built his reputation on certainty. People paid premium prices because they believed he always knew what he was doing. People invested because they believed he always won. People followed because they believed he was untouchable. Two possessions had already damaged that illusion. A third could destroy it. The former champion grabbed the basketball from beneath the hoop and squeezed it hard enough to whiten his knuckles. His breathing had changed, faster now, sharper, more emotional. Across the court, Shaq remained exactly the same. Calm, patient, watching. That contrast infuriated Donovan. He pointed at the giant. No, the word echoed through the gym. Several people exchanged glances. Donovan took a few steps forward. No more perimeters. Nobody responded. The coach continued. No more steals. Another step. No more blocks. His voice grew louder. We're doing this the right way. The irony escaped him completely. A few investors noticed. A few did not. Donovan walked toward the paint and slapped the ball against the hardwood. Post up. The ball bounced back, near the rim. Another bounce. You and me? He pointed toward the basket. Man against man. The crowd remained silent. Nobody wanted to mention that he had just changed the rules. Nobody wanted to mention that he was abandoning the challenge he confidently accepted a few minutes earlier. Power often survives because people become afraid to point out obvious things. Shaq looked at him for several seconds, then nodded once. Okay. That answer surprised everyone, especially Donovan. The coach expected resistance, expected argument, expected negotiation. Instead, he received agreement. Again, it somehow made him even angrier. Elias leaned against his cleaning cart near the baseline. His stomach tightened. For the first time all afternoon, concern replaced curiosity. The first two plays had involved timing, positioning, skill. This would be different. Post-play involved contact, force, momentum. And Donovan no longer seemed interested in proving he could win. He seemed interested in proving he couldn't lose. Those were very different motivations. The digital clock above the court switched to 2:45 p.m. Several clients moved closer. The circle around the court tightened. Nobody wanted to miss the final possession. A wealthy investor wearing a tailored gray suit whispered to the man beside him. Why does the giant keep agreeing? The second man shrugged. I don't think he's worried. Neither could explain why, they simply felt it. Donovan positioned himself near the low block. The basketball rested against his hip. His face looked tense. The smile was gone. The humor was gone. Even the arrogance seemed strained now, only desperation remained. Across from him, Shaq stood inside the paint, waiting, hands relaxed, expression neutral. The contrast looked almost unfair. One man appeared trapped inside his emotions. The other stood completely outside them. Donovan dribbled once, then lowered his shoulder. The signal was obvious. He wasn't planning a basketball move. He was planning a collision. The coach exploded forward. His shoulder drove directly into Shaq's chest with every ounce of force he could generate. The impact echoed across the court. Several spectators flinched. The contact looked violent, unnecessary, personal. Shaq didn't move. Not backward, not sideways, not even slightly. The effect resembled someone trying to push a parked truck. The giant absorbed the impact and remained exactly where he started. The crowd noticed immediately. So did Donovan. His eyes widened. For a brief second, confusion interrupted the aggression. Then he tried again, harder. Another shoulder, another drive, another collision. Nothing. Shaq remained planted, perfect balance, perfect control. The hardwood beneath his shoes seemed more likely to move than he was. Several investors began exchanging uncomfortable looks. The situation had stopped resembling competition. Now it looked like frustration. And frustration is difficult to hide in public. Donovan shoved again, this time with both hands helping the motion. A clear foul. Nobody said anything, nobody needed to. Everyone saw it. Elias shook his head slowly. The coach wasn't trying to score anymore. He was trying to erase embarrassment. That never ends well. The giant finally lifted his eyes. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just slow motions. The change was subtle. Yet the entire gym felt it. Shaq hadn't looked directly at him like that all afternoon. There was no anger there, no hatred, no mockery, just complete stillness. Absolute stillness. The kind that makes emotional people uncomfortable, because it offers nowhere to hide. Donovan suddenly felt very aware of the audience surrounding him, very aware of the cameras, very aware of how hard he was trying. The realization arrived at the worst possible moment. His concentration cracked, only slightly, enough. The basketball shifted away from his body, a small mistake, a veteran mistake, the kind experienced players immediately recognize. Shaq moved, one hand, one motion. No violence, no struggle, no wrestling. The ball simply disappeared. Gone, stripped clean. The steal happened so effortlessly that several spectators initially thought Donovan had dropped it. He hadn't. Shaq had taken it. The difference mattered. A lot. The giant secured possession and stepped backward. One step, two steps, creating space. Donovan spun around instantly. Panic flashed across his face before he could hide it. For the first time all afternoon, everybody saw it. Not frustration, not arrogance, not confidence. Panic, real panic, because there was no fourth possession, no second chance, no speech that could fix this, no championship ring that could help. Only one shot remained, and suddenly Donovan Royce understood exactly how much was riding on it. The problem was that understanding came too late. The basketball rested securely in Shaq's hands as he stepped backward from the paint. The giant moved without urgency, without excitement, without any visible sign that he was about to end the most important afternoon Donovan had experienced in years. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One man looked like he was carrying the weight of the entire building on his shoulders. The other looked like he was taking an evening walk. Donovan immediately lunged forward. "Don't run!" His voice cracked slightly. Several people noticed. The former champion pointed aggressively toward the basket. "You wanted 3 shots." Shaq nodded once. "I know." The calm response somehow made everything worse. Around the perimeter, 42 investors and clients stood completely silent. Earlier they had laughed. Earlier they had enjoyed the spectacle. Earlier they had expected easy entertainment. Now nobody seemed interested in jokes. The atmosphere felt different, heavier. The outcome suddenly mattered. Donovan moved closer. His expensive tracksuit clung slightly to his back from sweat. Tiny beads of moisture had formed along his forehead. His breathing remained elevated. Across from him, Shaq looked as though he had barely started exercising. That detail bothered Donovan more than anything else. The giant wasn't struggling. Not physically. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Nothing about this challenge appeared difficult for him. The digital wall clock above the court changed to 2:48 p.m. The final possession had arrived. One assistant coach quietly whispered, "He's not going to shoot from out there." Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Shaq continued backing away from the basket. One step, then another, 24 feet. Beyond the top of the key. A few people frowned. This wasn't the highest percentage shot available. A layup would be easier, a dunk would be safer. Most players would choose certainty. Shaq stopped. The distance didn't concern him. Across the court, Elias watched without blinking. His cleaning cart sat abandoned beside the baseline. For the first time in years, He wasn't thinking about overdue medical bills, wasn't thinking about rent, wasn't thinking about debt collectors. Everything had narrowed to a single moment, a single possession, a single shot. Donovan spread his arms, confusion mixed with desperation. "What are you doing?" No answer. The Giant simply held the basketball, steady, comfortable, patient. The former champion took another step forward, then another. His confidence had disappeared completely now. Everyone could see it, including him. The worst part wasn't losing. The worst part was realizing everyone else could see it happening. Shaq slowly raised the ball. The motion finally triggered Donovan's instincts. He rushed forward, too late. The Giant elevated smoothly. No wasted movement, no dramatic flourish, no attempt to show off. Just a clean shooting motion developed through decades of repetition. And throughout the entire release, Shaq never broke eye contact. His eyes remained fixed directly on Donovan. The coach froze. For one strange second, the gym disappeared, the crowd disappeared, the cameras disappeared, the noise disappeared. Only the shot remained. The basketball left Shaq's fingertips. Perfect rotation, perfect arc. The trajectory climbed higher than most people expected. Several spectators instinctively tilted their heads upward to follow it. The ball seemed to hang there forever. One investor unconsciously held his breath. Another gripped his phone tighter. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody blinked, straight toward the rim. Snap! The net cracked sharply. The sound echoed through Apex Vanguard Athletics. Not a rim bounce, not a lucky roll. Nothing messy. Pure, clean, final. The gym remained frozen. A few people looked toward Donovan. Others looked toward the Giant. Nobody knew what to say. Because the challenge had ended exactly the way nobody expected. 3 possessions, 3 victories. Complete, absolute, undeniable. The basketball bounced once beneath the hoop and rolled slowly toward the sideline. Still nobody spoke. Shaq calmly lowered his arms, then reached up and pulled back the hood covering his head. The reaction was immediate. Several investors gasped. One woman covered her mouth. An assistant coach actually took 2 steps backward. The recognition moved through the gym like electricity. No introductions required. No explanation necessary. Everyone knew that face, everyone. The billionaire, the Hall of Famer, the basketball legend, Shaquille O'Neal. The realization hit the room all at once. The Giant they had ignored, the stranger they had mocked, the visitor they had tried to remove. Not a random man, not a nobody, not an intruder. Shaquille O'Neal. Donovan's face drained of color. For the first time all afternoon, he looked genuinely lost. Not angry, not arrogant. Lost. Several investors immediately began replaying the last 30 minutes in their heads. Every insult, every laugh, every assumption, every mistake. The silence became painful. Shaq didn't acknowledge any of it. No speech, no victory lap, no lecture revenge. Instead, he reached inside his hoodie pocket and removed a solid black document folder. The same folder he had carried into the building. The folder containing the reason he came. The room watched closely. Shaq turned, not toward Donovan, toward Elias. The maintenance worker immediately looked behind himself as if expecting someone else. Nobody else stood there. Shaq walked across the court. Every eye followed him. Elias looked confused. "Me?" Shaq stopped directly in front of him. Yes. The Giant handed him the folder. Elias accepted it carefully, almost nervously. Inside sat the preliminary contract for a new National Rehabilitation Foundation funded with $100 million. His eyes widened. He looked up, then back down, then up again. Certain numbers shouldn't exist inside a janitor's life, yet there they were. Shaq spoke quietly, enough that only people nearby could hear. "I've been looking for someone who understands what recovery actually costs." Elias couldn't find words. The Giant gave a small nod, then turned around. No celebration. No dramatic farewell, no final insult directed at Donovan. Nothing. He simply walked toward the exit. The heavy glass doors opened, then closed behind him, just like that. Across the court, Donovan Royce remained standing exactly where the final shot had defeated him. The championship ring still sat on his finger. The building still belonged to him. The money was still in his accounts. Yet somehow none of it felt useful anymore. Because the one thing he had spent years protecting, his image, had just shattered in front of everyone. And as the gym remained silent around him, Donovan realized the Giant had taken something far more valuable than a basketball game. He had taken the room. 14 days later, Donovan Royce discovered that the room never came back. At exactly 8:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, he unlocked the front entrance of Apex Vanguard Athletics and stepped inside. The silence hit first. Not complete silence. The air conditioning still hummed. The lights still worked. The digital displays still glowed. But the building sounded wrong. Empty. The polished hardwood court stretched across the facility without a single basketball bouncing on it. The luxury recliners along the sidelines sat vacant. The private shooting stations remained powered on, waiting for athletes who never arrived. Nobody was there. Donovan stood motionless. The emptiness felt larger than the building itself. 2 weeks earlier, 42 wealthy clients had filled the facility almost every day. Some had paid annual contracts worth over $150,000. Several corporate groups had reserved recurring training sessions 6 months in advance. Now the courts looked abandoned. One assistant coach entered carrying a tablet. His expression said everything. "Another cancellation?" Donovan asked. The coach nodded. "That's 8 this morning." Donovan closed his eyes briefly. The number hurt. Not emotionally, financially. 8 cancellations represented nearly $100,000 in annual revenue disappearing before breakfast. The assistant hesitated, then handed him the tablet. A list of names filled the screen. Every client who mattered, every investor who mattered, every sponsor mattered, gone. Some cited scheduling conflicts. Others mentioned business priorities. Most offered no explanation at all. They simply left, because wealthy people rarely stay where embarrassment lives. The viral video hadn't helped. Over 14 million views in 12 days, millions. The internet had given it a nickname. The Three-Shot Lesson. Donovan hated the title. He hated the comments even more. People weren't discussing basketball. They were discussing character. And character is much harder to defend. The former champion slowly looked around the empty facility. Everything remained exactly where it had always been. The same equipment, the same lights, the same court, the same championship ring. Yet somehow everything felt smaller. Across Chicago, 43 minutes away, another building was experiencing a very different morning. Elias Thorne inserted a key into a glass entrance door and unlocked it. For a moment he simply stood there, looking, breathing, trying to accept reality. The sign above the entrance read, "Thorne Rehabilitation." The letters still looked strange to him. For 32 years his name had never appeared on anything important, certainly not a 40,000-square-foot rehabilitation center. Yet there it was, real, permanent, paid for. The former maintenance worker stepped inside. Sunlight poured through the eastern windows and spread across brand-new flooring. State-of-the-art recovery equipment lined the therapy areas. Rehabilitation pools occupied the lower level. Motion analysis labs filled an entire wing. Every detail had a purpose. No unnecessary luxury, no pointless decorations, no investor theater, just recovery. Exactly the way Shaq wanted it. Elias walked slowly through the facility. 2 weeks earlier he had been pushing a mop. Today he managed a national foundation backed by $100 million. The transition still felt absurd. His office contained a desk worth less than some of Donovan's chairs. That was intentional. The budget prioritized patients, not executives. At 8:41 a.m., the first athletes began arriving. A former marathon runner recovering from hip surgery. A firefighter rebuilding strength after a knee reconstruction. A 48-year-old construction worker learning to walk without pain again. Nobody cared about status. Nobody asked about income. Nobody checked net worth. Injury had already equalized everyone. The foundation simply treated them like human beings. By 9:03 a.m., the therapy floor had come alive. Physical therapists guided exercises. Patients worked through mobility drills. Machines beeped softly. Conversations replaced silence. Progress replaced pity. Elias stood near the observation area, watching everything unfold. Then somebody tapped his shoulder. He turned and laughed immediately. Shaquille O'Neal stood there, holding a large white bakery box. No security. No assistants. No publicity team. Just Shaq. "You started without me." "Elias." He shook his head. Shaq pointed towards I. "No, then pointed toward Elias. "You run the place." The distinction mattered. The giant carried the box toward a pair of cheap folding chairs positioned beside the therapy floor. They cost less than $40 each. Neither man cared. Shaq lowered himself into one with visible effort. His knees immediately rose almost to chest level. The chair looked completely overwhelmed. Elias laughed again. "You know we can afford better chairs now." Shaq opened the bakery box. Inside sat a dozen glazed donuts. These work. Fair point. They sat there eating donuts while athletes continued their rehabilitation sessions nearby. No speeches, no ceremony, no photographers, just two former athletes watching other athletes fight their way back. A man in his 50s took several painful but successful steps without assistance. Both watched. A woman recovering from a severe ankle injury completed her first assisted balance exercise. Both watched. A former college player smiled after jogging for the first time in nearly a year. Both watched. Those moments mattered more than any ribbon-cutting event. Shaq finally looked toward Elias. "How's the knee?" The question caught him off guard. Nobody had asked that in years. "Not seriously." Elias smiled. "Better." Shaq nodded. "Good." Then they returned to watching the therapy floor. Simple, comfortable, real. Across the city, Donovan Royce sat alone inside a nearly empty basketball academy filled with expensive equipment and fading prestige. Across the city, Elias Thorne sat in a folding chair surrounded by recovering athletes whose lives were improving every day. One man had spent years building a business around status. The other had built something around dignity. Only one of those investments kept growing, because championships eventually become memories. Money eventually changes hands, fame eventually fits. But helping someone stand back up after life knocks them down creates a different kind of victory. The kind that doesn't need a scoreboard. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that lasts.